Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you're a BS accountancy student staring down the barrel of the Management Advisory Services, or MAS, section of the LCPA, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to completely hack your brain to master manufacturing costs. We are tossing out those dense, boring textbook readings. Instead, we're giving you the exact, structured explanations you need, not just to pass a quiz tomorrow, but to deeply understand this material for the boards. Let's be real for a second. As an accountancy student, your biggest enemy actually isn't the material itself. It's the forgetting curve. I mean, you sit in a super long accounting lecture, you learn something in your second year, and by the time you're sitting for the LECPA in your fourth or fifth year, it's completely gone, just wiped. So today, we're using a psychological technique called cognitive chunking. We're going to build actual mental folders in your brain so this information locks in for the next 3 years.
Here's our roadmap to set up those mental folders today. We've got LECPA brain hacks, the 3 elements of manufacturing, decoding manufacturing overhead, prime and conversion costs, overtime and idle time, and finally, a rapid-fire bullet review.
Section 1, LCPA brain hacks, hacking the forgetting curve. Moving right into Section 2, 3 elements of manufacturing, also known as the Big 3. Okay, so to chunk this massive, kind of intimidating concept of factory production, we first need to realize that every single manufactured product on planet Earth is built from exactly 3 cost components. It doesn't matter if a factory is producing a high-tech smartphone, a heavy-duty kayak, or just a simple wooden table. Management accounting boils its creation down to a really simple 3-part recipe. Basically, if it happens in the factory, it falls into one of these 3 buckets, period. Bucket number 1 is direct materials, or DM for short. These are the raw materials that can be physically and directly associated with the finished product. Think about the heavy steel used in making an automobile, or the sweet syrup used in the bottling of soft drinks. Direct materials are the physical, fundamental ingredients that you can easily, and more importantly, cost-effectively, trace straight to that final unit you're going to sell. Bucket number 2 is direct labor, or DL. You'll actually hear this called touch labor a lot. And why is that? Because it represents the work of factory employees that can be physically and directly traced to converting those raw materials into finished goods. If a worker's hands or the specific machines they're operating are physically assembling the unit on the line, their wages are classified as direct labor. And finally, we have bucket number 3, manufacturing overhead, or MOH. This consists of literally all other manufacturing costs that cannot be directly or easily traced to specific units produced. So if a cost happens inside the factory walls, but it isn't direct materials and it isn't direct labor, it automatically gets dumped right into manufacturing overhead. It's basically your giant catch-all bucket for everything else happening in the factory. All right, Section 3, decoding manufacturing overhead, the catch-all bucket. Now pay close attention here because LECPA examiners absolutely love testing your ability to figure out what goes inside this tricky overhead bucket. They love testing this chaos. First, we have indirect materials. This is stuff like machine grease that keeps the equipment humming, or the glue in a piece of furniture. Yes, it's physically in the product, but tracking a single penny's worth of glue per chair. That's a total waste of an accountant's time. Then we have indirect labor, factory supervisors, maintenance crews, security. They don't technically touch the product, but the factory obviously can't run without them. Finally, we have the broader facility costs, factory utilities, depreciation on the equipment, property taxes, and insurance. The magic word here is factory. If it's a factory cost that isn't DM or DL, boom, it goes straight into overhead. Section 4, prime and conversion costs, the core combinations. Now we need to look at how those 3 fundamental elements we just talked about combine to form the core formulas that you absolutely must memorize for the boards. First up, prime costs. Prime costs equal direct materials plus direct labor. These are your direct primary inputs. Next, conversion costs. Conversion cost equal direct labor plus manufacturing overhead. Just ask yourself, what does it actually take to convert a pile of raw materials into a finished good? Well, it takes human labor and a running, fully powered factory. That right there is your conversion cost. But what's really interesting here is the overlap. Look closely. Direct labor is a vital component of both prime costs and conversion costs. It's doing double duty. And guys, this is a classic LECPA trap. When examiners ask you to calculate total manufacturing costs, students often accidentally double count direct labor because they just blindly add prime and conversion costs together. Never forget that direct labor serves dual duty in both of those formulas. Section 5, overtime and idle time, the examiner traps. Speaking of traps, let's get into the high-stakes scenarios regarding labor costs that trip up thousands of Gen Z examinees every single year. Overtime and idle time. When a direct laborer works overtime, things get a little complicated. Let's say a worker makes 20 pesos an hour normally, but they get time and a half for overtime, meaning they make 30 pesos an hour. If they work an overtime hour, their base pay, that original 20 pesos, remains direct labor. But that extra 10 peso premium, that gets treated completely differently. Total compensation for that specific hour is actually split. The base rate goes to direct labor, and the premium rate goes straight to overhead. So the crucial question is why? Why is the overtime premium classified as overhead, rather than a direct cost of the specific product being worked on during that hour? Well, because overtime is usually a matter of overall production volume, or maybe poor scheduling, or a massive rush of total orders. It really wouldn't be fair to penalize the specific product being built at 6 p.m. just because it happened to fall during the overtime shift, right? The overtime premium is a burden caused by the entire factory's workload, which makes it an indirect cost borne by all products. Therefore, it has to be manufacturing overhead. Then we have idle time. This is when workers are being paid, but they aren't actually producing anything because of a machine breakdown, a power outage, or maybe a delay in raw materials arriving. If a direct laborer is standing idle waiting for a machine to be fixed, you obviously can't charge their wages for that hour to a specific product because no product is being made. You can't charge a kayak for the hour a worker spent staring at a broken conveyor belt. So that dead time immediately gets stripped out of direct labor and gets dumped straight into the manufacturing overhead bucket. Section 6. Rapid Fire Bullet Review. Active Recall. Let's lock in this 3-year retention right now with an active recall, high-speed review of the most testable concepts we've covered today. Take a mental screenshot right now. The big 3 are direct materials, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. Prime costs, that's DM plus DL. Conversion costs, DL plus MOH. Direct labor is the sneaky overlap between the two. Any factory facility costs like utilities or depreciation, overhead. Indirect materials and supervisors, overhead. And those 2 massive examiner traps, overtime premiums and idle time, you guessed it, always manufacturing overhead.
I am going to leave you with this final provocative thought to really test those new mental folders we just built. If a direct laborer stands idle for 2 hours due to a factory power outage, does their pay for those 2 hours increase prime costs, or does it increase conversion costs? Think about it carefully. Apply the rules of idle time. Figure out exactly which bucket it falls into, and then trace that bucket back to the formulas we just learned. Keep this question right at the front of your mind as you head into your next study session. You've totally got this.